Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/PSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Endgame's converged endpoint security platform is transforming security programs, their people, processes, and technology with the most powerful endpoint protection and simplest user experience, ensuring analysts of any skill level can stop targeted attacks before information theft. Endgame unifies prevention, detection, and threat hunting to stop known and unknown attacker behaviors at scale with a single agent. For more information, visit endgame.com. Organizations' internal networks are overly permissive and can't distinguish trusted from untrusted applications. Attackers abuse this condition to move laterally through networks, bypassing address-based controls to spread malware. Edgewise abstracts security policies away from traditional network controls that rely on IP addresses, ports, and protocols, and instead ties controls directly to applications. Edgewise allows organizations to analyze the network attack surface and segment workloads based on the software and how it's communicated. Edgewise monitors applications and protects data paths using zero trust segmentation. Visit edgewise.net/Security Weekly to get your free month of visibility. Some restrictions apply.
It's Thursday, July 16th, and I am trying to sit and work on a puzzle. I don't know if this will pick up the sound coming from the hallway, but it's someone's TV or something, and it's destroying me. Realize I slowly lose ability to overcome it and even make words. It makes me so sick. Even while wearing earplugs. I have really bad pain in my left side and my left brain, especially in the back, and the whole brain feels slow and fatigued. I'm sitting cross-legged on the bed because it's more stable to me. It's either this or laying flat, But if I lay flat right now, since everything is spinning so much, I won't also be able to record this. Right now, my left side doesn't seem to be there if I don't look at it. Even my head and straight down doesn't seem, it feels like a black hole, like there's just nothing there. If I were to stand right now, I would not know where I am or where my side is. My brain hurts so badly, and this feels like it's killing me to try to think or make words. I want to vomit. And pass out. Hi, another little documentation on the dizziness and internal palpitations. I still definitely feel it. Let's see, this is Sunday, I think the 21st of September. I went to the emergency room on Friday, the 19th, and the palpitations and dizziness were incredibly intense then, and got worse and worse as time went on in the day, but it is occurring. It occurred lightly yesterday. Yesterday I still had major problems with speech. It was about a quarter or a third of this speed, and with a very strange stuttering and like mouth shaking thing that I've never experienced. The first time was Friday in the ER. So right now I'm sitting up in my wheelchair. If I turn, it's especially trying to look to the side. It's like my eyes are rolling or flipping back and forth. and I feel this flopping or like electrical response through my chest. It's not just centered in my heart right now, but it's kind of through the chest cavity. Standing, I do tend to fall over, and it's really hard to figure out how to stop if it's physical falling or just in my brain. Basically, that looking down or up into peripheral vision makes it worse. Thank you.
Welcome back, Paul Security Weekly listeners. I feel like I should have done like the finger snap thing where my outfit changes because we're pre-recording the interview. But it's nice to be here. This is airing on our last Paul Security Weekly of the year, and we're ending on what I believe is a very inspirational note. Mandy Logan is here with us. She lives in Las Vegas, Nevada, and was accepted to speak at DerbyCon, where I met her for the first time and started to learn about her story. And she talked about her journey, and she's going to go into details today and how she got here. Very inspiring story for me. Mandy was extremely sick doesn't even cover it as I read Mandy's story. She suffered from brain strokes and basically hacked her body back to health. And I think this is just such an interesting story. And Mandy, it's wonderful to have you on the show today.
Thank you. I am very happy to get to be here and to, I think, kind of bridge that idea of that our humanity is very similar to our technology.
Yeah, certainly. Anytime we've covered, you were just, speaking earlier about, how the brain works and how it's similar to other systems. And anytime we cover a story on that, it's absolutely fascinating, how the brain works and the similarities that it has to a lot of the systems that we're, implementing and trying to protect and fix and hack and break today.
Exactly. And I think once, how it's like necessity is the mother of invention.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same as what I view as like, if it's a 0 day is happening and that second it becomes real. This is what's happening this moment. And the only thing that we can do as an individual, or if you're working on a team, is pull from what you have right there. So doing what you have, what you can with what you have wherever you are.
And unfortunately, at some point you had very, very little to go on, which is just amazing. I don't know if you want to set the stage before I ask my next question. This is burning on my mind is what kept you going. But take us up to, that point where you started the recovery in terms of brain hacking.
Okay, well, a little bit of background, like before the injuries and the strokes, I had been highly functioning. I worked full time. I lived on the beach. I enjoyed my job. I traveled a lot. I volunteered. I did things. Then all of a sudden, there's this day, a moment where I was attacked and strangled, and that's what led to the torn artery, which then led to the blood clot, which caused these strokes. And so at that moment, you're now all of a sudden reduced to being, one doctor called it like I was reset to being a 6-month-old, but I had a little bit more cognitive awareness than a 6-month-old might. But I didn't have the ability to communicate, to make words, to comprehend speech, to understand questions. My memory was reduced to about 2 seconds. So even if somebody spoke to me, even if I could comprehend the words, it was 4 words in. I don't remember what the first word was. So this really still has no meaning to me.
Yeah, my dad suffers from a brain disease. And when I was learning about his condition, it was similar in a sense that I was thinking of it like a computer. And
Mhm.
it sounds like in your case, it was writing stuff into memory or the hard drive, but it was only there for 2 seconds. And my dad's
Mhm.
condition has very similar parallels. And I think that's
Okay.
a starting point for us, discussing how to hack the brain. So when you were essentially in the first stages of recovery, when you had very little in terms of function, as you described, what kept you going? What was your motivation to start down this road of recovery?
Um, when I look back, I think one of the absolute simplest things to say on it was I didn't realize I was supposed to die. It never entered my mind. I I remember when the doctor in one of the emergency rooms, because this took place over the course of days and weeks, that
Hmm.
when one of the doctors finally said, "You've had a significant cerebellar stroke, and we're transporting you right now." Um, internally, I just went, "Okay, this is what we're doing now."
Right. There was nothing you could do to change it at that point, so you
No.
were almost forced to accept
Um,
what was happening.
yes, and I think then the idea that I've always had an internal drive of efficiency. And I figured, well, if this is where it is and this is what is going on, a couple of the absolute biggest things to me were keep humor. Because there was a period where I was completely locked in, meaning there
Hmm.
was no external response
Hmm.
whatsoever.
Hmm.
I was aware, but my cognitive ability was so compromised that even that was sketchy. That
Hmm.
was not normal awareness. So being completely locked in, one thing that I focused on or prayed about or set an intention on was don't, if there another stroke has to happen because they continued
Hmm.
on, it's like, please don't let it take humor.
Right.
Because I
Right.
figured if I can at least listen to people and have some kind of interesting running dialogue inside, I can survive.
Sure. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense actually when you think about people who are maybe not a result of a brain injury or trauma, but are isolated from everything. They
Mhm.
literally go insane. And it
Yeah.
sounds like your way of coping with that was using whatever function was returning to your brain to listen to people and maintain interest here and listen to things and find any type of humor is one of the things that kept you going, which makes perfect sense.
Right. And that was accessible. Like that was something that I could
Hmm.
actually feel a response internally that, oh, if that's lightly humorous, I get some kind of
Response.
feedback
Yeah,
inside.
yeah.
Right. And nobody else has to know. Nobody else has to validate that, I guess. It was just a
Mhm,
simple thing. So that plus I had a very consistent years long spiritual practice or meditation, mindfulness,
mhm,
focusing and being able to try to zero in on my intention.
mhm.
And so that I think is a gigantic component to why, when confronted with this and being unable to speak or comprehend or move or use an eye or anything, then it was a very easy jump to make it granular.
Right, and it was really one step at a time. You were working with what you had, in one of
Right.
your descriptions on your GoFundMe page, for example, you said you used, tongue resistance. Tell me about that. What kind of prompted that, and what was that the first kind of initial starting point for you having feedback with
Yes.
other people?
Yeah, and actually to have some kind of comprehension of what was going on internally as well,
Mhm,
because, well, what I did was, and this is hard to describe because there was such little thought inside, and there were long periods of time where if there was an internal voice, it was caveman talk. So as I'm describing this, I'm kind of compiling many years of
sure,
working this out. But
sure.
what I did was figured, okay, my body is an electrical system. And if I trust my system that if a response is a yes or an on or good,
Mhm,
then it will strengthen my body. So my muscle resistance will increase. And the way I could handle that at that time was by pressing my tongue against my teeth.
Mm-hmm.
So then, as let's say I'm in the hospital and I don't understand what they are speaking about, I know they're asking me questions,
Mm-hmm.
but it had no correlation to anything inside.
Mm-hmm.
I pulled way back into that. Well, I'm going to go for an internal yes or no, an on or off response, and I am going to do this by that if my tongue stays strong against my teeth, then it's a yes, it's an on, it's good. If my tongue goes soft, then I reject whatever that was.
Did the doctors and nurses figure that out, or
No.
Okay.
The majority, and it's interesting because even though this worked really well for me, and
Mm-hmm.
it led to me being able to then take control of medication and my therapy and my recovery to where it worked for my system
Mm-hmm.
as quickly as it could. The external view was that me doing this actually kind of caused me a problem because it appeared externally like I was doing better than I was.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So they didn't know that I was like, they would come up, and if say it's a nurse or a tech is like asking something, I would have no clue what they meant, but figured that my senses and somewhere in my body, in my cellular memory, something would connect. So if my tongue stayed hard, I would say yes. And then after that, I didn't know what they were bringing. I didn't know what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't consciously have a concept of if I was going to get food or if I was going to be taken for more testing or anything. It just kind of had to go with that second.
Yeah.
That this is saying yes. Something in my body is saying yes to this. So we're going to go with that.
And it sounds like that was the beginning of reforming the pathways in your brain and reforming the muscles and really starting to revive your system. So what came next? And I guess I'm in anticipation up to the point where a doctor and or nurse realized that you were communicating in some form.
Well, I mean, they recognized because they could see, like I would nod my head yes. I could still control my head. By that point, if I could open my eyes or they could rouse me enough,
Mm-hmm.
then I could shake my head yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
And so really what led after that, though, as far as an internal framework, that's what I worked on, was creating then an internal framework to comprehend what was happening inside. Because now there's all, as kind of in this cloud of, I don't know what any of this is. I have to break it down into something that will connect, that would make sense to another human,
Mm-hmm.
to another person that's listening or seeing me.
Right.
So really it was breaking down every bit of understanding, well, if a word came in, was it what did it bring up in me? All I could really trust was my response, not what it meant, because I didn't know that, but I could trust my response that it either brought up an emotion, a memory, an action, and really then using my tongue and my muscle resistance to start categorizing things. So I would try to then break out one little part and go, okay, is this an emotion, a word, a memory, an action? Whatever my body tested strong on, I went with that. Then I created additional categories, eventually progressing towards an overall functioning framework.
That's just an amazing insight into how the human body and the brain works, is your story of how you're rebuilding all of this function. And I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone that had that level of insight into how to rebuild all those or experience rebuilding all those functions.
True. Right. And that's what's interesting, because now it's like sitting here and talking, and in my mind, I'm still going, wow, look at, I'm breathing and my eyes are working. You're understanding my words. The correct words are coming out.
How long
cognitively.
How long did it
aware.
take before speech started to come back? I'm assuming there was therapy involved in that, or
Yeah,
quite a
hundreds
bit,
and
right?
hundreds of hours.
Mm.
So speech is a little, all of it actually is a little difficult to put on an exact, nothing was linear. It was like there might be finally a day where I spoke, let's say I talked for 4 minutes. That one day, I could do that, but then now I had to sleep for the next 4 days
Hmm.
to recover from doing that. So
Wow.
there was speech, the hundreds of hours of trying to learn how to get the actual muscles inside to form and getting your mouth to shape
Hmm.
the right thing to
Hmm.
get the right sound to come out. Um, that took, I would say, the first year and a half. But then we're still talking that I was in dark silence flat on my back for 23 and a half hours a day for 2 years, 2.5
Wow.
years.
Oh my God.
Um, and my system
The
could not
amazing part is,
sustain.
Mandy, you are so
Yeah.
articulate and well spoken today that if you hadn't told me the story, I would have never guessed in a million years that you had to rebuild your speech from scratch. It's
Right.
amazing. It's amazing. I mean, you're talking to me today, and it feels like you're talking about someone else.
Really?
Yeah.
I know. And that's what's interesting. It's like I meet people and I'm going, they have no idea
Right.
that I am functioning in this entirely different
Mm.
way than I did previously. But now it's getting, that's what I was going to say. It's kind of like it's getting to where it's becoming automatic.
Mm-hmm.
And so those things that you do day to day that for you are a natural flow, it's rather spontaneous. I feel like now I have, or I know that I have an insight that I can take this particular second and I can break it down into a categorized and then into like a granular thing of what precisely I am experiencing,
Mm.
what all parts of my system are going through for this to come together to be able to talk and to breathe and to sit here and to interact and to comprehend you.
Were the doctors communicating to you the limitations based on your condition and continually surprised? Like, did they reach a point where they were like, well, you really won't be able to do this again, but based on your track record, maybe that's not true? Because it's, again, amazing that you were in that condition and you are where you are now. Like, what were the doctor's
Now,
reaction through that whole process, right? Because doctors are typically like, yeah, you're not going to be able to do that ever again. And then, like, I feel like
oh,
you were
absolutely.
constantly impressing them by being able to do that and moving on to the next thing.
Oh yeah, no, it was constant. I mean, several years in, I was talking to the head of one of the co-heads for the University of Arizona. He
Mhm.
was one of my physicians, and I was saying, well, I'm having I'm trying to describe, and this is saying that I've taken 18 hours to put together a note of like 8 things that I need the doctor to know.
Right, right.
And I'm saying, I'm still having a problem with this. I'm still going through this. And he goes, look, the only thing expected for you was death. So you're doing well. Just enjoy it.
Wow.
And I'm like, but this is horrific. Like, this
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
not
I'm not. Yeah, you were never
satisfactory.
satisfied with where you were and kept fighting forward. And that's one of the other
Exactly.
amazing things is you. It sounds like you never gave up. It sounds like you were always to make that type of recovery. Makes me believe that you and were never giving up wasn't in the cards ever.
No, it wasn't. And
Mm.
it was hard to find actually any. There were definitely good doctors. There were good nurses. There were
Mhm.
people, and I'm incredibly grateful for helping. But no, they did not have any expectation for me to ever move or do anything. And some of them were actually pretty cruel. How it felt to me was
Sure.
very cruel because it would be that, like one doctor, he said, well, it's 18 months. If you haven't recovered it by now, you're not going to.
Mhm.
And so as you're listening to these experts and going like, well, is that true? And so the same thing, I would go, I don't, I would check. Then I would check my muscle resistance. Is
Right,
that
right.
true for me? No, it's not.
Mhm.
So I don't care what you are saying. It's not that
Yeah.
it didn't hurt. It still was incredibly rough to hear and to battle and to then have to try to stand up to them and say, no, I appreciate the therapy, but the therapies you are doing are hurting me. Like these certain parts
Mm-hmm.
are still damaging me. And so having to figure out how to advocate for myself
Yeah.
when you're in such reduced functioning and they are telling you, well, there's no more money, because I was in nursing homes and hospice care for 3 years
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have access to money. There's not other things that I was really pulling from. So I think in a way that was beneficial. I mean, there were a lot of doctors and therapists that refused to work with me or
Mm-hmm.
declined to take on the liability of working with me because there were so few people that had ever survived brainstem strokes.
Mm-hmm.
It was so unknown that they wouldn't work with me. So then I took it. Well, that means I have to craft my own.
Right. What was it like for you, Mandy, when the day came where you got to go home?
Oh my gosh. It was thrilling, but it was ridiculously daunting.
Mm.
It was thoroughly terrifying. I was not really at a position where I should have been on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then I also so yearned to
To be
be
home, sure.
on my own. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
and to not
Right.
be, it's hard. And it's hard being in those environments where every single other patient that has come in has never left.
Mm-hmm.
They had never had somebody leave the facility before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there were a lot of people that had helped through those years. And I, was in a friend's home for a while. I was in care homes, the nursing homes, back and forth, depending on what I needed. But to actually be out on my own was an absolute unknown. I
And that
really
obviously
couldn't.
provokes fear of the
Well,
unknown.
yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, now you are so reduced still in capability.
Sure.
It was still pretty much paralyzed the majority of days. And so, I mean, at that point, when I left the nursing home, to be able to take a bath, it was once a week, and I would sleep for 3 days prior to it. It would
Wow.
take about 3 to 4 hours to be in the bath. And part of what would happen was because the sensory input was still so extreme that the sound of the water,
Mm-hmm.
my body interpreted it as motion. So it felt then internally, it's like I'm trying to overcome that my body is acting like I'm 8 separate parts on 8 separate boats and I'm passing out because it's too much stimulation to have the water touching my skin
Mm-hmm.
and to have to move a limb and to have to try to breathe and handle this. So I'm in there for 4 hours, let's say. I get out, I lay on the floor. Then I was on the floor for 8 or 9 hours until I could crawl into and get in bed. And then I would sleep again for 2 days. That was the extent of what could be done.
Mm-hmm.
So just thinking about it's not just, oh, I'm living on my own and you're alone. It's like, how do you get food? How do you move and keep things paid and understand when numbers have no meaning? And
Right.
I can't look at a computer screen or read. I'm still trying to learn how to comprehend reading or how to write or how to do any of those things that are actually very necessary to living on your own.
What methods did you use to start to relearn those skills to be able to use a computer again and do those things?
I used a lot of techniques that are used for highly autistic individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a friend of mine who became my power of attorney, she had worked and gone to school and everything through her own very intense ADHD. And then
Mm-hmm.
she had worked with autistic children at a school for autistic. And so what we did was greatly reduce any amount of stimuli. That meant I had triple hearing protection. I would
Mm-hmm.
have blinders. We would take like a page of a book and then block out everything except maybe 2 words. And I would work on those 2 words over and over and over again until I could sound them out. And then working to try to expand that. It was a very slow, intentional process. With writing, regaining, we're talking about having to rewire everything to relearn how to even use a limb. And I'd still have to consciously go through what pattern of muscles needed to connect in order to grip a pen, or to have some kind of grip strength. And then it was incredibly, again, I think this is part of why we like Linux. It's because you can get granular.
Sure.
It's just as an adult, you kind of judge yourself for having to get that granular. It's almost like, why I should be able to do this. Why am I not able to do this? And so then it might be like, I can grip this pencil and I would grip it. And if I couldn't move it, but I could maybe move it a piece of paper with another hand.
Right,
so I would grip the pencil and move the other paper a little bit, just kind of shuffling it around because that was what I could do, and really connect to the sense of the pencil touching the paper. And then from that, I went through very specific processes of, okay, I have to relearn to write my name. So I sat there for weeks and weeks rewriting my name 450 times, and then adding an address in, because it was like, what do I actually need to be able to communicate? And
in school we use that as punishment.
It's so
to rewrite things over and over again.
Yeah, and you know what? I guess to make it where it wasn't as much punishment for me, one thing I did then was, after I could write my name and address, I heard about the what is that called? The TV station, like Better Homes and Gardens or something.
Yeah.
And they
HGTV
have
or
the
something.
yearly giveaway of the big house.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what I did. I wrote out 700 entries to try to win
Make
that
it
house.
productive, right? Your sense of humor is amazing after everything you've been through. In your talk at DerbyCon, Mandy, what was what do you believe in, and what did you want to convey to the audience? What was the takeaway? What were some of the major takeaways based on your amazing story?
Well, that was a fantastic opportunity, and I have to thank the community for pulling together, because they did, like you mentioned, the GoFundMe.
Mm-hmm.
People did contribute in order to make this possible. But at the talk, it was in the inaugural health and wellness track, and so this was talking a lot to people about their emotional turmoil or problems or burnout, things that the InfoSec community and every single human face. And so what I wanted to bring up was that this version of what I did, the muscle checking, the muscle resistance, breaking things down into logical, analytical process to where I could comprehend it and get over the fear of that, oh, this emotion is arising or this is coming up and I feel completely overwhelmed. I really wanted to show that every single person can create their own version of this. Every single person can do this. Plus, really to get the idea across that it's not blind faith and it's not just luck that you get through something.
It's work. An effort.
It's work. It's work. And you get out of it what you put into it.
Oh my God. That was my grandfather saying. That's amazing that you said that. It's I quoted him in a book I wrote, the whole thing. That was my grandfather would say that all the time.
Yeah. And so it was, and I really wanted people to also get the idea of that you are a fantastic operating system.
Yeah.
Your hardware is there to help you. You can cross that conscious subconscious barrier and start working with your body and allowing, a lot of what I did that allowed recovery was relegating every single thing that could be relegated to my subconscious. That's what I did. So every single choice or anything numerical, anything like that, I reverted back to simply muscle checking and not trying to cognitively understand or think on it. So it's kind of the same thing as you're freeing up bandwidth. This is
Right,
what I was
right,
doing. I
right.
was
Yeah,
freeing
yeah.
up ability, and I was taking it as like, this is lag. Okay. I have 880,000 bits of information that my system needs to comprehend, but I am only processing at 10,000 bits an hour. So how do I streamline this? And then I worked with the idea of, like, grouping of memories, how memories are actually grouped and
Mm-hmm.
clustered in our brains. And I started increasing my parameters
Mm-hmm.
as I reached each goal.
Right.
And I wanted people at DerbyCon to start taking that what they do in InfoSec, what they do in their jobs, their analytical abilities, their introverted tendencies, or whatever it is that they take as being not emotional or not human, like it being more
Of like a
logical.
chemical programming, and I think what you're saying is, what I hope you're going to say is, we can all overcome those things based on your
Right,
experiences. Yeah.
right. And use your skills. Like, one of the other things I really wanted to get across, because this is so important to overall communication. And from having gone to different conferences, for me, when I'm in most of the talks, it all seems to come down to communication. Aren't
Mm-hmm.
we trying to get the networks to communicate?
Right.
We're
Yeah.
getting
Sure.
red team, blue
Mm-hmm.
team to communicate. You're getting these ideas that you have in your mind. You're figuring out how to communicate them so other people can grasp onto them. Well, if you take that internally and start doing it and applying those same techniques to your own body, your own problems, your own emotions, your own memories, your own everything, then you create your own internal unshakable platform.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, then, as the developers and programmers and everybody get more internally aware and clear, how could their technology not embody the exact same thing?
Mm-hmm. Mandy, I'm not quite sure how to ask this, but in terms of
Mhm.
function today, are there still limitations, or like, is there a percentage wise in your recovery that you've achieved, and is there still more work to do?
Definitely. In fact, I just started whole new rounds of speech therapy,
Mm-hmm.
cognition therapy, vision therapy, and physical therapy.
Mm-hmm.
This is still very intense. So, like right now, I'm speaking like this, but this is with having slept a long time, prepared
Sure.
for this for
Sure.
several days.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do this now through the day as I fatigue, as the neural fatigue
Mm-hmm.
advances, the deficiencies return. So the
Mm-hmm.
paralysis, blindness, aphasia, being able to visually see it, um, those increase through the day.
Mm-hmm.
And it increases based on stimulation. So, or input.
Mm-hmm.
So I still have to incredibly limit the amount of, say, electronic sound, or looking at a screen, or being around large groups of people moving, because
Mm-hmm.
I still spatially don't have, I had lost all vestibular function, but I lost all understanding of spatial awareness.
Mm-hmm. Like
So there was
processing
still a point.
sensory inputs, in other words, it sounds like.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, because it was like
Mm-hmm.
every single filter that you had naturally created over life was gone. So I was not only compromised, but I was now taking in far more information
Sure.
in a second than I had previously.
Mm-hmm.
So that is still the case. I have definitely increased my processing ability and gotten to where now I can process. I'd gone from one thing at a time to maybe doing six things at a
Mm-hmm.
time. This has been a slow thing. It's still, at the end of the day, every day, I'm not operating as I was intentionally designed to operate.
Right. Right.
You know? So it's very tiring. It's very,
Sure.
um,
And I have to ask, the headband, is that what is that? Sorry.
yeah, this is a concussion prevention
Mm-hmm.
headband. So previously, because I had the concussion never stops.
Mm-hmm.
The Every time my head is bumped, then it's a full blown concussion.
Mm-hmm.
And in this, I have fallen down or fallen over or hit my head probably another 18 times,
Mm-hmm.
or actually more than that. But So previously it was a full hard helmet
Mm-hmm.
that was required, but I have graduated
Mm-hmm.
to this, which is used like on soccer fields,
Mm-hmm.
used in
Gotcha.
sports for concussion prevention.
Mm-hmm. Are there other kind of healing methods? And it's amazing. We talk about hacking our bodies, and there's so many people like, well, you got to take these supplements and do this type of martial art or yoga or anything like that. Was there anything that really helped you kind of in that realm of healing? As I think it's really kind of like hacking your body, right? Is all those
Mhm.
things that people talk about.
It is, yeah, absolutely. Definitely, there were many, many things that aided. Thinking like nutrition
Mm-hmm.
and breaking down finally what foods or supplements or medications were beneficial and which weren't,
Mm-hmm.
which was a big benefit of using my muscular system, because then I could get incredibly particular on how much of each thing was needed at a particular time.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that was fish oil or magnesium or
Right.
protein or
Mm-hmm.
greens or medications, specific medications that were required. That was a very large part, I think, a very large foundational aspect of being able to then continue the body hacking, to
Right.
continue the
Right.
consciousness hacking. I used a lot of, there were the mainstream therapies, speech therapy,
Mm-hmm.
occupational therapy, relearning to brush your teeth, like everything like that. I mean, you have no idea how hard it is to get your teeth brushed when you're paralyzed. It's almost impossible. Um, and so things like chiropractic was big.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Touch therapy, as I started relearning how to locate my limbs and knowing they were attached to me and being able to start reprocessing that. Okay, I'm being touched on my left ankle and I'm not being cut, I'm not being burned. I have to start associating this with what is actually happening. Um, Things like that, aqua therapy, to relearn to walk, to be
Mm-hmm.
in a safe environment. Eventually, now more recently, yoga has been
Mm-hmm.
beneficial. CBD, THC, like
Mm-hmm.
medical marijuana,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
that was beneficial. I created a lot of therapies, such as, once I got far more advanced,
Mm-hmm.
going into running heavy equipment, like running excavators
Mm-hmm.
and stuff, because it's a safe way to do it. You're inside a cage,
Mm-hmm.
you're completely
Right.
protected,
Right.
but it so deeply challenges hand-eye coordination, depth perception, your processing, and like being able to understand what your end goal and how am I going to do it here.
Right, right.
And
Yeah, I never thought of that. And it's funny. I actually ran an excavator in my backyard. I'd never,
yeah,
operated one ever before. And when you described that, I was like, yeah, like it
yeah,
took me time, a healthy person, to learn how to operate it, and
yes.
I can totally see that helping in a many different aspects. And there are places where you can do that in Las Vegas, right? It's like
There
a
is, and
tourist
that's
attraction.
and
Yeah,
that's a huge benefit, because actually my
yeah.
dad runs a place here called Dig This.
Mm-hmm.
So once I was able to be transported to Las Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
then when I first went into the equipment here, it was, I mean, the owner of the company, Ed, the whole company was very supportive, but it still was incredibly, I had to do only a little bit at a time. And the first time I get in there, do these things, and then I sat there weeping for an hour and a half, purely because of the overwhelming systemic like exhaustion
Sure.
from trying to do this. And they
Mm-hmm.
had to carry me out of the machine, put me in the truck, and then it was sleeping for another 28 hours
Mm-hmm.
solid. But then being able to go back and seeing my such substantial increase, um, that has been a very key component for getting the fine motor skills, to
Mm-hmm.
getting to that. Other things, sound therapy. I eventually worked with mostly just tones to
Mm-hmm.
be able to regain understanding sound or anything, and then using solfeggio frequencies. I don't know if people are familiar with that.
I'm
It's
not. No, sorry.
no, okay. So it's basically music that includes tones at very precise hertz. So, and these particular hertz correspond to different systems or help support different systems or emotions, anything in particular ways. That's actually a large part of how I did recovery, because I knew that everything was based on electrical. I mean, everything had a particular frequency. And if I could figure out the balancing frequency for whatever that blockage or problem or deficiency was, then I could start healing it. And so working with hertz and frequencies, resonance, it was to me the same as from my construction engineering background, was that I knew any masonry wall has a very particular frequency at which it will crumble. It doesn't matter how reinforced it is. It doesn't matter what the foundation is. It had a frequency at which it would disintegrate. And so I figured internally it had to be the exact same thing. I just had to find the right frequencies, the right hertz,
the learning,
the right
the learning
balancer.
processes you went through are absolutely amazing. I'm the first person to suggest this. Have you considered writing a book about your experiences, or is that in the cards?
I really would like to.
I think it'd be awesome.
It has been brought up quite a bit, and a number of doctors asked for it because they're like, because I'm able to articulate what I experienced, where many people don't get to, and I could give them precise input and be able to break it down into percentages and amounts and then adjustments, and that this is how my system adjusted when this happened, and I can tell you that this is where I feel it in my brain. This is the exact part of where it is working. This is where I feel these energy lines or these synapses creating and where it fires. So I would really enjoy writing it, especially to help, anybody, so they can overcome anything, but also for people with highly sensitive neurosystems and for people on the spectrum. For people who have reduced speech ability, being able to maybe give that bridge that helps neuronormative people grasp what is actually going on inside.
Sure. How did you get involved with the security community? Did you have a background in security, or did you just think about this is a hacking process and then found the security community?
Basically, as I started thinking about okay, I've got to get into something that's no longer in my head. I'm really tired of being in my head.
Right.
And so when I looked at career fields and career retraining and learning, and I was very drawn to cybersecurity. And people were like, well, I don't understand the correlation. But to me, like I was saying before, it's creating the networks, creating the systems, figuring out the vulnerabilities, patching those, figuring out what balances something out and how you can do something in order for it to be more sustainable long term. Doing the incident response stuff, the penetration testing, that is so precisely what I did internally that it's like, to me, I can't help but see the correlation. Plus, I figured, well, if I've done this internally, then that has to mean that there's something that I could be good at in this arena.
Sure. Now, we talk about breaking into the security field quite often throughout the entire history of our shows. What was the best thing? Like, how did you get into the security community?
I went on LinkedIn and I started just looking up names of people who did cybersecurity. A person that ran a cyber warfare range. I contacted them and I said, okay, very simply, this is where I'm coming from. I'm relearning to read and blah, blah, blah. I want to get to this. What is your recommendation? So I took in, what they said and what they had found most helpful in their careers. Then I went to a meeting of the Shadow Syndicate, which is the home of DC 702 here in Las Vegas. I went to their meetup. They were doing Hacker Jeopardy. I knew not a thing whatsoever. I was put on a team. I sat there, me and Trevor, using my canes and everything.
Mm-hmm.
A couple people were really nice. I
Oh,
asked
and
at
for
the
those
end,
who don't know, Trevor's your dog, right?
oh, my service animal.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I have a federally recognized medical mobility assistance medical alert service animal.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I walked up on stage and I said, okay, here's a little bit about my background. This is where I'm coming from. Again, understand I'm like sub noob.
Mm-hmm.
I am literally relearning how to read, and this is where I'm starting from. But I have all these ideas about neuro integration and increasing red team and blue team communication and being able to find vulnerabilities. And these are the things I'm interested in. And so, anybody here, would you talk to me? Would you tell me how you got into this field, what you do? They were phenomenal, man. The guys that run it, Colin and Alex, and then the team, they talked to me afterward, and then they actually organized the very next meetup. They had a guest speaker come, and the entire thing was how to get into cybersecurity. And these are the paths that we took. So they gave demonstrations of how they got to where they are. So I just started then really going to those meetings. Again, still ability to listen or to watch anything was still very limited. So I would then try, this goes back to a key point on relearning to read. I want to say, because I had to get very efficient in it very quickly. So I would scan things. I wouldn't understand anything. And then I would muscle check for only the page or the section or the sentence that I needed to read.
Right. Yeah,
I did that. And that's what I started doing with cybersecurity, was starting to get to learn the tools, the lingo, the words. And then I would start building connections. I mean, that's it. And so then I decided that I need to see if this community is really where I fit or not, if I do feel like this is where I could be at home. So what I did was volunteer for B-Sides Las Vegas. I got accepted. And the support staff there was fantastic. This was a huge physical trial to even see if I could sustain being in a crowd or walking and talking and doing all those things. And I needed, one of the big benefits with volunteering for B-Sides Las Vegas, it's amazing, but you also get to stay on site. And I needed that. I needed to be able to instantaneously go lay down and go to sleep after I had been up for an hour or 2 hours or something. So I volunteered at B-Sides. I social engineered my way into a ticket to DEF CON.
Nice.
And I went to Pablo Brewer, who was my supervisor at B-Sides, was on the Diana Initiative board. And when I had first talked to him and said, this is where I'm coming from, he was like, okay, you need to go to Diana Initiative.
What is the Diana Initiative?
Diana Initiative is an organization that had a mini con at DEF CON, and they are specific to encouraging diversity, inclusivity, and for disabled and female people in InfoSec. So there was that. And then I made contact with Megan Roddy, who is in InfoSec, and she is high functioning autistic. And she spoke about being autistic in the community. And so I had contacted her, talked with her about what I was going through. She was very key to me being able to go to do any of this. I mean, thinking back, I didn't even own a computer. I did not have a laptop. I've had nothing. So actually, the MacBook that I'm talking to you on right now was a gift from her. It was one of her old ones. So being able to talk to people and get these little components. So I went to the conferences, and by the end of DEF CON, I knew absolutely it was precisely where I needed to be. Not only for my own mental stimulation, getting to go into all of the talks and hearing things, and whether it was quantum computing or medical device hacking or hacking fax machines or anything like that. I was like, this is precisely what I've done. It's almost like I feel like I'm living AI. We all are. so the correlation there was so strong and comforting. And then the community was so welcoming. I never, ever once felt as an outsider. I never felt ignored. I felt very, I mean, the goons, like say at DEF CON, the goons were so helpful to attend to the disability aspect of what I needed in order to be able to handle being at the conference.
It's so wonderful to hear too, because so many times, I mean, we've been covering the security industry for almost 14 years now, and it seems the negative aspects of conferences are the ones that are getting the most attention. And I'm really glad you highlighted the positive aspects, because we've seen it over the years. Many of us have been in the industry for a long time. We see that there's a lot more positive things that happen at the events than there are negative, but the negative gets all the press. So yeah,
it's like there's 12. To me, it's like there's 12,000 more positives that happen there, and the good people. I mean, even looking at it from coming from the construction background, and people, there's so much discussion about gender equality, or there's not enough women in this sector. There's not, we need to do more, and I agree with that. Yeah, let's continue that. But my view is a little bit different, because I'm coming as a disabled newbie that comes from construction background, where in construction, I was, in 3%, like from what I did, there was only 3% of women doing it. So are you kidding me to come to InfoSec and talk to these great, amazing, kind-hearted guys and everybody who really want nothing more than to pull together? And you get that undercurrent there. At least I did. I mean, I don't cry real easily, but the first day at B-Sides, just one of Mike Hammer sat down and talked with me. And now he's been doing this since the 70s, and we sat down, and I just was like, okay, I'm here. This is simple. It's true. They are accepting. This is brilliant. And I started crying. And then at DEF CON, like going through the talks, I mean, it was emotionally overwhelming, physically overwhelming. It was exhausting. There was all of that. But by the last day, some of the biggest things that helped me, and like to help pull forward instead of feeling like you're pushing up a mountain. My dad was really intelligent, because he told me at one point, he's like, you don't need to push anymore. You've got to find what simply pulls you. Find what pulls you. And the community within the conferences, and I'm going to say, like, the good-hearted men actually have allowed me to find this really safe and unique way to be pulled forward in my interests.
That's awesome. And speaking of that, so where are you going now? You're doing some training in security, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts of like where you're going and what's next for you, and what we can do to help.
Oh, cool. Right now, I am working with a subgroup within the Shadow Syndicate group on OSCP. So working toward, I'm really focused on red team things right now. That's what I'm most drawn to. So I've been working on the, EJPT, or the Student Penetration Tester credential, working on learning Linux, and I started participating in CTFs. And so it's been a very slow, incremental process. But my goal right now is to continue through this, and I would love to have my OSCP done by DEF CON next year. And going back a little bit, because at the conferences, so during Hacker Summer Camp, going there, I had set then my personal goal is to speak at DEF CON, at Sky Talks, at B-Sides. Those are personal things that I want to do. So I need to find all of those components that are actually beneficial to the InfoSec community from my story, and providing, whether that's just pure inspiration. And because a lot of people at DEF CON came up to me and would talk about the struggles they were going through with their wives or family members that have gone through strokes or head injuries, or things that they have gone through. Like at DerbyCon, getting to speak with one of the presenters, Stuart, who a couple years ago had he had a spinal cord stroke. really, as you get into it, it's not just the data analytics and like one data scientist told me it sounded like I was the analog version of
Right.
being able to give these detailed data points. So for me right now, what is a giant help is, well, actually financial, because being on disability does not give you much access to anything. And then the support and refinement that comes through the community, through speaking and hearing other people's information, so I know what's helpful to them and can really then zero in on my experience of how I can go to where they are, and then we can all join together on one common ground, like one understood ground that translates and corresponds to the technology that is being brought forth.
That's awesome. Mandy, to say that your story is amazing and inspiring is an understatement. So thank you. Thank you. So I couldn't think of a better way to end, the last segment of the year. So that's great. And, let us know what we can do to support you.
Oh, I definitely will. This is a huge milestone to me too. And I'm really glad that I get to market with you and with your staff. They have been very helpful and supportive. And I still just love seeing the humanity side of what people think of as so cold and so analytical. And I just don't see that.
Awesome. Mandy, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And with that concludes the show, our last show of the year. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. We'll see you next time. Over and out.